The other day, I found myself agreeing with the Vatican, believe it or not. But in order to explain in what sense I agreed with them, I think you need to understand where I'm coming from when I do so. So first of all, let me point out what I'm talking about here. There was an article in the Telegraph the other day. Somebody sent me a link going, hey, have a look at this. Probably from the perspective of, isn't this hilarious? But as I was reading it, I kind of was left scratching my head going, that sort of a thing, right? Let me explain. Okay, the article itself is titled "Surge in Satanism Sparks Rise in Demand for Exorcists, Says Catholic Church." And then it goes on about how the Catholic Church warns about how easily available information about devil worshipping and so on is on the internet. You see, there is one level at which I just find this funny, of course. You know, if you think about it from one perspective, you're just looking at one group of people who believe in something imaginary, who are worried about other beliefs in something imaginary, or the worship of one imaginary entity over another. And there is a level at which that is just hilariously funny, and I'm sure there are people who will be making videos about this, pointing exactly that out. But having said that, okay, yeah, the other thing I want to acknowledge is that I do realize that there is a form of Satanism out there that is of a philosophical nature. It's a philosophical position that somehow sees itself as, okay, opposed to some of the Christian teachings, but that does not actually necessarily involve the belief in or worship of any supernatural entity called Satan. To be perfectly honest with you, even though I can sort of get where some of these people are coming from, I find it a little bit bizarre that you would call your own philosophical viewpoint or philosophical worldview after an imaginary entity that is supposedly the antithesis of another imaginary entity, both of which you supposedly don't believe in. It just makes no sense. Why no sense to me, to be perfectly honest. Why would you call yourself a Satanist in that case? Why not just find a catchy, nice little name for your worldview and call yourself that, if you don't actually believe in the supernatural entities from which your name was derived. But that's just an idea. Anyway, that also is neither here nor there. Let me just say that I acknowledge the existence of that sort of philosophical form of Satanism and put it to the side. Let me just focus on the actual point that was being made and the kernel of validity that I see in there. You see, what the church is pointing out is that there is not only available on the net a whole plethora of information about like devil worshipping and occultism and so on and so forth, and the Catholic Church sees that as a threat to, I would imagine, its own authority. I just see it as a threat to general sanity. But also, I can't help but wonder what is going on here. You know, there's a whole kind of movement towards certain forms of occultism, and whether people are actively seeking it out or basically displaying this interest in all these crazy, bizarre TV programs that are currently doing the rounds. TV series involving vampires and supernatural nonsense and hocus pocus and bunkum and frankly anti-scientific gibberish. that's being drooled out over the TV screens by people who are making so-called entertainment about this sort of stuff. And this is accompanied by a move away from mainstream religious belief systems. But obviously, these people who seem to be attracted by all this mumbo-jumbo and blatant babbling nonsense don't seem to be moving away from mainstream religions in order to move toward a, say, to use a Thunderfootism, an enlightened rationality, an enlightened rational position, or anything like that. These people seem to be moving away from a mainstream religious position to utter craziness. And that is what seems to be attracting them. And I can actually see why there is a certain validity in being a little bit concerned about that. Because these people are not moving towards a more healthy, I would think, worldview or way of looking at reality. I would say it is actually, in my humble opinion, it is, even though I couldn't adhere to the belief in a supernatural God either, at least major religions, certain types of major religions in any case, seem to have matured into something at least reasonably moderate and by and large relatively sane and grounded in a certain level of humanity. I, for example, quite enjoy, I've been watching videos lately by this YouTube user All Saints Monastery, who is an Orthodox Christian and who has been posting some very enlightened videos from, I believe, from my perspective. Now obviously when you listen to his videos, you will hear the language of faith. And as an atheist, for example, you might feel somewhat put off by that. You might be hearing him talk about supernatural entities that you and I are unable to believe in, that you and I even see very good reasons not to believe in and reject as being real as such. But what I find is that I can listen through that language and listen to what is actually being said and the actual message that's being put across, and the messages that this man puts across on his channel All Saints Monastery are eminently sane in my opinion, and are, you know, compassionate, humane, and I would be, you know, I only can feel the utmost respect for this man and his philosophical outlook on life, regardless of what he actually believes in or not. That is the sort of level at which I can respect a particular religious point of view. The occultists, the people who have cut themselves away from the mainstream in order to enter La La Land, are an entirely different kettle of fish. Often their philosophical grounding is completely missing, and they are, again, I'd have to agree with positions such as the Vatican would espouse, where they see these people as hopelessly adrift on a sea of nonsense. And they are, even though I might feel that at a basic level the belief system that underlies what the Vatican stands for is equally nonsensical, they still make a very valid point about all this strangeness that some people seem to be so attracted by after losing their grip, losing their tether to at least what used to be some form of stability of their older mainstream religion. I am not a big fan of mainstream religion. I am not a big fan of big, organized religion. But at least it allows for some levels of sanity for some of its adherents. Whereas all this occultism, I don't think so. And that is the level at which I agree with what the Vatican is saying. Go figure. I agree with the Pope about something.